In the spring of 1999, a quiet Colorado town braced for prom season, unaware that one girl's disappearances would haunt it for decades. 16-year-old Leah Montgomery left home with dreams stitched into her handmade dress and never returned. For 21 years, silence ruled, until a torn piece of fabric hidden in a motel wall shattered everything the town thought it had forgotten. Spring in Brentwood, Colorado usually arrived like a shy guest, tentative, a little cold at first, but with bursts of wildflowers that crept through the fields like whispers. That April, the town buzzed with preparations for the annual spring formal. For high schoolers, it was the biggest night of the year, second only to graduation. Dresses were altered, tuxedos rented, and in the middle of it all was 16-year-old Leah Montgomery, bright, curious, and quieter than most, but with an artistic streak that often made her stand out without trying. Leah had spent weeks working on her own dress, a soft, burnt-orange gown with embroidered tulips near the hem. It was unlike anything in the local boutiques, and that's what she loved about it. She didn't want a dress anyone else had worn. She wanted something that said, "I made this. This is mine." On the morning of April 17, 1999, she left her house early, supposedly to run last-minute errands before getting ready. She told her mom she'd be home by 4 p.m. to start hair and makeup, but Leah never came home. Her mother, Vanessa Montgomery, at first thought she'd lost track of time, that Leah had gone with friends and forgotten to call. But when dusk fell and the answering machine remained silent, the worry bloomed fast and deep. By 7:00 p.m., Vanessa had called every friend Leah might have gone with. None of them had seen her since school let out, panic rising like bile. Vanessa drove to the school parking lot, still filled with chattering teenagers in satin and sequins. She stood by the curb, scanning every face. Nothing. Leah wasn't there. And that's when she drove straight to the Brentwood Police Department. The officer on duty took her statement, but didn't sound concerned. 16? Could be she ran off for the weekend. Happens more than you'd think, he said, tapping sluggishly on his keyboard. If she's not back by Monday, let us know. She was excited about tonight, Vanessa replied through clenched teeth. She spent weeks making that dress. She would never skip it. The officer logged the report, but didn't issue an alert. That decision, quiet, bureaucratic, would cost them years. What Vanessa didn't know at the time, what no one knew, was that Leah hadn't gone to meet any friends. She'd boarded a bus headed toward the outskirts of Brentwood to a near-abandoned inn called Sierra Vista. The week before, she'd come across a flyer at the school art room. Young artists wanted, one-day creative talent workshop, scholarship opportunity. Sierra Vista Inn, 12 p.m. Leah hadn't told anyone. Not her mom, not her best friend. It felt fragile, private, like a thread of hope just for her. She was used to being overlooked, her art winning small competitions, never big ones, her teachers praising, but never pushing. The flyer felt like a lifeline. She copied the address into her notebook, tucked it hidden. The old inn had long since shut down as a tourist stop. Locals called it a money pit, haunted by bad plumbing and worse rumors. Still, the promise of a scholarship, of real recognition, was enough to draw Leah in. She arrived around noon, her dress carefully folded in her backpack, her sketchbook tucked under one arm. From the outside, the Sierra Vista looked just as dilapidated as people said. Chipped paint, boarded windows, weeds clawing at the steps. But the front door was ajar, and a sign inside read, "Workshop this way." That was the last verified sighting of Leah Montgomery. What happened inside those walls would remain a mystery for over 2 decades. Back home, Vanessa barely slept. By Sunday morning, she'd plastered every telephone pole and grocery store wall with Leah's school portrait. By Monday, she was knocking on doors. At school, a few students mentioned that Leah had seemed distracted lately, that she'd been sketching more than usual, keeping to herself. No one mentioned the flyer. No one knew. At least not then. The school didn't organize a search. The police waited 72 hours before filing her as a missing minor, not an abductee. Without witnesses, without evidence of a struggle, and with her being 16, they listed her as a likely runaway. Vanna screamed at the detective, begged the local news station to cover her daughter's disappearance. A brief segment aired once, late at night. It didn't spark anything. For the next several weeks, Venice wandered the edges of Brentwood like a ghost, taping new posters when rain ruined the old ones, checking alleys and bus stops and empty fields. And Sierra Vista, no one thought to look there. No warrant was filed. No lead pointed in that direction. The name never made it into the official case notes, because Leah had kept it to herself, because she believed. And belief, in that moment, cost her everything. By the time the sun rose over Brentwood the next morning, Vanessa Montgomery had already walked 5 miles around town, her shoes soaked through from early dew, her hands scraped raw from stapling flyers to trees and mailboxes. Her voice cracked every time she asked, "Have you seen my daughter?" And she could barely look at the picture she'd printed in a rush at the 24-hour pharmacy. Leah's school portrait, smile soft, hair tucked neatly behind her ear, eyes too trusting for a world like this. She had not slept. Her body had been running on panic alone, and every passing hour twisted the knot in her stomach tighter. At 8:00 a.m., she returned to the Brentwood Police Department with a folder of printouts, hoping someone would take her more seriously in daylight. The officer at the front desk, a younger man named Greg Townsend, seemed more receptive, but still offered the same response she'd gotten the night before. "Ma'am, like we said, she's 16, technically not a minor in Colorado. She might have left on her own. She spent a month on her dress." "Do you think someone just walks away from that?" Townsend offered a half-hearted nod and promised to note the urgency, but there were no posters issued, no press alert, and definitely no Amber Alert because Leah didn't meet the criteria. Townsend stood in the parking lot for several minutes after leaving, staring at the reflection of her own face in her car window, wondering how many other parents had been told the same thing, how many had listened and waited only to regret every minute lost. She refused to be one of them. When she returned home, the house felt frozen in time. Leah's shoes still sat by the door, her coat hung neatly on the hook, and the faint smell of hairspray lingered in the hallway. Vanessa walked upstairs like a woman preparing for battle, her fingers trailing along the railing as if searching for proof her daughter had been there just yesterday. In Leah's bedroom, the bed remained unmade, the blanket half-folded, the pillow with its slight indentation. Vanessa stood in the doorway for a long moment before stepping inside, eyes scanning for anything that might have changed. Then she saw the sketch pad. It was lying on the desk, next to a small tin of colored pencils and an eraser worn down to a nub. Vanessa opened the pad slowly, flipping past pages of abstract doodles and fashion drafts until she reached the final spread, a full-length design of the burnt orange dress, complete with floral details, matching clutch, and handwritten measurements. It was Leah's handwriting. At the bottom of the page, in careful cursive, she had written, "Sierra Vista, at the word PM, Sierra Vista, 12 p.m. Vanessa stared at the words, heart pounding. She hadn't heard that name in years. Sierra Vista Inn had closed when Leah was a toddler, rumors of code violations, bankruptcy, and a fire that damaged the East Wing. The locals always called it that place on the hill. Why would Leah write that down? And why hadn't she told anyone? Frantically, Vanessa searched the drawers of the desk, rifling through makeup bags and pencil cases, pulling out binders and notebooks until she found a folded sheet of paper tucked beneath a composition book. It was a flyer, old school in design, black text on white paper like it had been printed on a library printer. The headline read, "Creative Youth Arts Initiative One-Day Talent Workshop Portfolio Scholarship Opportunity, April 17th, 12 p.m., no organization name, no contact number, just an address." Vanessa's stomach turned. Why hadn't Leah said anything? She thought back to the past week. Leah had seemed busy, yes, but not distant. She'd been humming while pinning fabric to the dress form, asking if she could wear her mother's earrings from senior prom. This wasn't a girl planning to leave. This was a girl preparing for her moment, Townsend answered. "I found something," she said immediately. "A flyer. She went to Sierra Vista yesterday at noon. That's where she was going before the formal. You need to search that property." Townsend hesitated. "That place is condemned, Mrs. Montgomery. It's been empty for—" "I don't care," she cut him off. "My daughter might be in there." Townsend promised to send someone by, but Vanessa had already grabbed her keys. The drive to Sierra Vista took 12 minutes. Every turn in the road felt like peeling back a layer of denial. The farther she got from town, the quieter it became. When she pulled up the gravel path to the inn, her breath caught in her throat. It looked worse than she remembered, shingles missing, vines overtaking the porch, one shutter hanging sideways. But the front door was slightly ajar. She got out of the car, heart racing. "Leah?" she called out. No answer. The wind creaked through the eaves. She stepped onto the porch and pushed the door wider, revealing a long hallway with peeling wallpaper and dust dancing in slats of light. She yelled again, louder this time. Still nothing. She moved cautiously, each footstep echoing through the space. The floorboards groaned under her weight. In one of the rooms to the left, she found a metal folding chair and a small table with an empty water bottle on top. The dust here had been disturbed. Someone had been here recently. She bent down and pulled it out. It was another flyer, same design, same language, but this one had a handwritten note in red ink. Confirmed, LM, 12 p.m. Vanessa dropped it as if it had burned her. Those were Leah's initials. She stepped back into the hallway, suddenly aware of how silent everything was. The hair on her arms stood up. Something was wrong here. She turned back to leave, but before she could reach the door, her foot caught on a torn piece of carpet. She stumbled, catching herself on the doorframe. That's when she saw the scratch marks, barely visible, just under the window frame near the exit. Not from an animal. They looked like fingernails. Panic surged in her chest. She ran out the door and didn't stop until she reached her car. As she slammed the door shut and locked it, she realized she was shaking. Sierra Vista was not just a location. It was part of something bigger, something Leah had been lured into, and now she had evidence. But who had organized the workshop? Why the secrecy? And, most importantly, who else had been there? The early spring morning in Brentwood, Colorado, was quiet except for the low rumble of machinery echoing off the hills. Sierra Vista Inn, long condemned and forgotten, was finally being torn down. A local development company had bought the land to build a commercial plaza, and the town, tired of the eyesore and its rumors, had welcomed the decision. 21 years had passed since Leah Montgomery disappeared, and the once whispered name of the inn had faded into urban legend status, just another cautionary tale told to kids who dared one another to sneak up the gravel path at night. But on March 11, 2020, refused to be erased without a fight. The demolition was halfway through when Malik Howard, a janitor assigned to clear debris and assist with site cleanup, stepped into what used to be a side room near the eastern end of the building. Malik was a quiet man in his 50s, known for being meticulous. He'd grown up just outside Brentwood and remembered vaguely the story of the missing girl from 1999. He had even helped search the trails behind the inn as a teenager, though he never connected that memory with the crumbling structure now yawning before him. As he began clearing insulation and loose boards, his boot kicked something solid near the base of a cracked wall. It sounded too hollow to be support structure. He paused, crouched down, and brushed away layers of dust and splinters, revealing a warped panel that didn't quite match the others. The grain was wrong, the nails were newer. It had been added after the original construction. With the help of a crowbar, Malik pried it loose. What he saw inside froze him in place. Wedged between the studs, behind a cavity no wider than a suitcase, was a cardboard box wrapped tightly in clear plastic. The box looked weathered but preserved, protected from rodents and moisture. He pulled it out carefully, setting it on the floor. Something about it felt wrong. He peeled back the layers of plastic, opened the lid, and recoiled. Inside lay a dress. It was burnt orange, wrinkled, and torn at the shoulder. The fabric, once elegant, was now stiff with time and covered in fine dust. But the color hadn't faded completely. Neither had the embroidery. At the hem, in small, neat stitching, were the letters L. Mel. Malik stumbled backward, knocking over a metal bucket. The noise drew 2 demolition crew members to the doorway. He couldn't speak at first. He simply pointed. One of them stepped forward, eyes widening as he took in the contents. Beneath the dress, wrapped in a second layer of plastic, was a small fabric pouch. Inside was a library card, plastic, slightly yellow dome, bearing the name Leah Montgomery. The card number had been long deactivated, but anyone who had lived in Brentwood long enough knew that name. Within the hour, police had cordoned off the site. yellow tape wrapped around rusted beams and caved-in doorways. News spread fast, even in a town that no longer wanted to talk about Leah. The dress and the library card were cataloged as evidence and sent for forensic analysis. Malik sat on the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket despite the morning heat, unable to stop shaking. "So just thought I was cleaning up drywall," he kept repeating. I didn't know." At the police station, Detective Marcus Reddle, newly assigned to the Cold Case Division, stared at the recovered evidence with a knot forming in his chest. He was 12 when Leah went missing. His mother had gone to school with her mother. He remembered the posters, the candlelight vigil that never turned into a memorial because there had never been a body. He had joined the force in part because of cases like hers, ones that got forgotten, ones that didn't get second chances. And now, 2 decades later, her dress was sitting in an evidence locker, sealed and tagged. It was real. This wasn't just rumor or legend anymore. The library card made it undeniable. Vanessa Montgomery was notified through a brief, solemn phone call. She didn't scream, she didn't cry. She simply said, "I'll be right there," and hung up. By the time she arrived at the station, her hands trembled, but her eyes were dry. She held the library card like it was her daughter's hand. "This was in her wallet when she left," she whispered. She always kept it, even after the school upgraded to barcodes. She didn't ask to see the dress. Not yet. "I told you she didn't run away," she said, to no one in particular. "I told them all." Forensics confirmed that the material of the dress matched fibers from Leah's bedding, kept in storage from the original investigation. The stitching was identical to samples of her sketches. It was hers, but where had it been? Who had put it there? And why, after all this time, had it been hidden in a wall, behind an obviously replaced panel? Scripted with plaster and announcers. Riddell ordered a search of the entire structure, though most of it had already been destroyed. In what used to be the adjoining room, beneath a loose floorboard, they discovered an empty duffel bag and a stack of outdated model release forms, unsigned. On one of them, in faint pencil, was a name. Leah Meehan. The coincidence was impossible. Riddell began to suspect what many were now whispering. Leah hadn't been a runaway. She'd been lured, and someone had helped cover it up. Malik, still in shock, remembered something else. "I worked here once," he said quietly, "in '99, as temp maintenance. Just for a few weeks, some guy came in, said he was running an art program for teens, asked me to fix a broken door in room 4. "Do you remember his name?" Riddell asked. Malik shook his head. "He didn't stay long, said the kids were just passing through. I thought it was weird, but I didn't ask." Room 4 had long since collapsed during the demolition, but its ghost was now central to a case reopened with force. In the lab, analysis of the pouch revealed faint traces of skin cells on the inside of the fabric, not enough for a full profile, but enough to know it had been handled. For the first time in 21 years, the file on Leah Montgomery had more than just paper and speculation. It had evidence, physical, tangible, the kind that made people listen, the kind that didn't go away. The news about the discovery at Sierra Vista broke quietly at first, a single column buried deep inside the local Brentwood Herald. But by noon the following day, a Denver outlet picked it up with the headline, "Dress found in wall tied to missing teen case from 1999. For Brooke Alvarez, a reporter for the Denver Tribune, that headline made her breath catch in her throat. She hadn't seen the name Leah Montgomery in decades, but the moment she read it, memories unspooled like a movie reel. Leah had been her seatmate in sophomore English, the one who doodled flowers in the margins of her notebook and lent Brooke a sketch pencil when hers broke. They weren't best friends, but they had shared smiles, group projects, and brief but genuine conversations in the school hallway. Leah was kind, quiet, but not invisible, and the fact that she had vanished without a trace had haunted Brooke more than she ever admitted. She remembered the missing posters, the buzz of whispered theories, and the silence that followed when the town moved on. But Brooke hadn't, not completely. Something about Leah's disappearance never sat right with her. And now, more than 2 decades later, a dress and a library card had surfaced. Brooke couldn't ignore it. She printed the article, called her editor, and requested 3 days off. Then she packed a duffel bag, filled her gas tank, and drove straight to Brentwood. It had changed in some ways. New shopping centers, upgraded streetlights, but the bones of the town were still the same. The downtown diner still had the same cracked leather booths. The high school sign was still slightly crooked, and the Montgomery house, tucked near the edge of Forest Drive, looked untouched by time, like it had been held together by memory alone. Vanessa Montgomery answered the door slowly, as if expecting someone else. Her eyes, though tired, sparked with something like recognition when she saw Brooke. "Brooke Alvarez?" she asked cautiously. "Yes, ma'am," Brooke replied gently. "I read about the discovery. I had to come." Vanessa stepped aside, allowing her in without further words. The living room was quiet, warm with the smell of cinnamon tea. A photo of Leah at age 12 still sat on the mantel, beside a candle and a pressed flower behind glass. Brooke sat across from Vanessa, notebook closed on her lap, unsure whether to approach this like a journalist or like someone who simply cared. She decided on both. "I remember Leah," Brooke said. "I remember how she used to fume while she drew, how her laugh always caught people by surprise." Vanessa smiled faintly, eyes glassing, said it made her feel like the walls were listening. Brooke hesitated, then leaned in. "Mrs. Montgomery, can I ask you something? Unusual. Did Leah ever mention anything odd in the days before she went missing? Anyone new? Anything that didn't sit right?" Vanessa's smile faded. She looked down at her tea. "Actually, yes," she said slowly. "It's something I haven't thought about in years." She stood, walked to a side drawer, and pulled out an old calendar diary from 1999, yellowed pages, ink smudged in places. She flipped to the week before Leah vanished. "Here," she said, tapping the page. "April 10. I remember writing this down because it worried me at the time. Leah said there was a man watching the school bus stop." Brooke sat straighter. "What kind of man?" "Said he was older, mid-40s maybe, always in a gray jacket, just standing near the stop every day after school for about a week. She thought he might have been a parent waiting for someone, but he never spoke, never picked anyone up, just watched." Brooke scribbled a quick note, adrenaline sparking behind her ribs. "Did Leah say anything else about him? Did she think he was dangerous?" Vanessa frowned. She said it felt strange, but she wasn't scared. She was more annoyed, I think, like he was interrupting her routine. Brooke nodded slowly. "Was there any school report about it? Did she tell a teacher?" "Not that I know of, and I didn't report it either. I thought maybe I was overreacting." Vanessa's voice cracked on the last word. Brooke reached out, placing a hand over hers. "You weren't," she said firmly. "You weren't overreacting at all." Vanessa took a shaky breath and closed the diary. "They made me feel like I was. The police, the school, everyone acted like I was being dramatic. That she just ran off. I knew she didn't. But they didn't believe me." Brooke sat back, eyes narrowing as she processed the new information. A man watching the bus stop. A week before Leah vanished, she remembered something else, a rumor back then about a modeling recruiter visiting nearby towns. Could they be connected? Her reporter's instinct kicked in, fast and sharp. "Do you mind if I talk to a few of Leah's old classmates?" she asked. "Maybe someone else saw him?" "Or maybe someone else was approached too." Vanessa nodded. "Whatever helps," she said. "I want people to remember her. I want them to care again." Brooke stood, heart pounding. "I promise you, Mrs. Montgomery, they will." As she stepped back into the cool air outside, Brooke flipped open her notebook and circled one name she remembered from those years. Derek Sloan, a substitute teacher, spring semester only. She couldn't remember his face, but something about his name stuck. She'd check the old yearbook at the library first thing in the morning, and while she was at it, she'd visit the bus stop. Maybe it still held ghosts. Maybe it held more. Detective Marcus Redd sat at his desk late into the evening, the overhead light casting long shadows across the scattered papers and file folders that made up the reopened case of Leah Montgomery. The discovery of the dress and library card had cracked the case wide open, but it was the conversation with Brooke Alvarez and Vanessa Montgomery that drove him to dig deeper. Redd had grown up in Brentwood. He knew the town, its rhythms, its secrets, and perhaps more importantly, its silences. Leah's disappearance had always lingered like a bad echo, but no one had questioned the original investigation. Not really, not until now. Determined to start from scratch, Riedel requested access to the archived call logs and tip sheets from April 1999. The physical sheets had been scanned into the digital archive only a few years earlier, preserved through a federal digitization grant. Most were routine: neighbors claiming to have seen someone matching Leah's description, reports of runaway teens in nearby towns, false alarms. But on page 11 of the tip log, Riedel paused. The entry was dated April 17, 1999, time-stamped at 3:43 p.m., just hours after Leah was last seen. The tip was listed as anonymous and had been scribbled hastily. The caller had reported seeing a teenage girl matching Leah's description walking with a dark green pickup truck, possibly a Dodge, with rust along the bumper and a dent in the rear tailgate. The girl seemed hesitant, the caller said. She wasn't struggling, but she kept looking back over her shoulder. The caller believed something was off. That was it. One paragraph, no follow-up notation, no witness interview attached, no license plate recorded. The final line read, Reed teared at the screen, a cold knot forming in his stomach. In 1999, without video surveillance, without active patrols, that tip should have prompted at least a drive-by, a follow-up call, something. But the report had been shelved, left to gather dust, considered unreliable because the caller's voice had wavered. Riedel printed the tip and clipped it to the top of the active file. Then he turned his attention to the other end of the lead, Sierra Vista's guest records. In 1999, the inn was already in decline, barely operating on the margins, but it still kept basic handwritten occupancy purposes. Most of those ledgers had been destroyed in a basement flood in 2004, but a single box had been preserved in the county archive, marked Late 1990S, non-digital. Riedel called in a favor, got a key, and spent his Saturday morning flipping through mildewed pages filled with shaky handwriting, phone numbers, and check-in times. Most names were legible, most rooms rented for a single night, drifters, long-haul truckers, people passing through. But then he saw it, a name that didn't quite sit right. The handwriting changed with every entry. Same name but different strokes, as if someone had tried to disguise it, or as if different people had been told to sign in under the same alias. The entries appeared every third weekend. Room 4, paid in cash, no license plate listed, no phone number, no ID checked. It began in January 1999 and continued through May. Riedel cross-checked the date. April 17, Franks had signed in, room 4. Noon, a sharp pulse raced through Riedel's neck. He checked the maintenance records for that same date. Nothing filed. The guest log didn't mention any group activity, but room 4 had come up before. In the janitor's testimony, Malik had been asked to fix a door there. It was the same room where the dress had been found, walled in next door. Same hallway. Same quadrant of the building. Riedel flagged the entry, scanned the page, and saved it to the digital evidence record. He sat back in his chair, the edges of something beginning to form, something deliberate. Someone had used Sierra Vista Inn regularly in the months leading up to Leah's disappearance. Someone with enough control to keep renting the same room without question. Someone who didn't want to be remembered. Reed picked up his phone and called Brooke. "You were right to come back," he said. "There's something you need to see." When she arrived later that afternoon, he laid out the call tip and the Sierra Vista ledger side by side. She read them slowly, her lips pressed into a line. "You think it's the same man?" she asked. "Green pickup, same date, same building?" "That's what I'm starting to think," Riedel replied. "Whoever he is, he was there when Leah was—" "Do you think he knew her?" Riedel tapped the name Daniel C. Franks. "If he used a fake name here, there's a good chance he used it somewhere else. What we need to do is trace this alias, cross-examine against motel records, incident reports, any property deeds or business licenses tied to that name or handwriting." Brooke leaned forward. "Do you still have that yearbook from 1999? "At the library." He nodded. "We'll go there next." She hesitated before speaking again. "I don't want to jump ahead, but what if Sierra Vista wasn't just where it happened, it was part of the plan?" Riedel didn't answer immediately. He looked back at the flyer Brooke had brought in earlier, the one Leah had found, Creative Youth Arts Initiative. There was no branding, no organization listed, no contact. The simplicity of it now felt chilling, like bait. "I think you're right," he said quietly. And I think Leah wasn't the only one who got one of those. Brooke Alvarez spent the next 3 days buried in library archives, dusty police bulletins, and digitized newspaper clippings that barely loaded on Brentwood's ancient public access computers. She hadn't planned on staying this long, but each clue she uncovered seemed to widen the story instead of close it. The name Daniel C. Franks yielded nothing in DMV records or school staff databases. Red Dell's team had checked handwriting samples against teacher applications across Brentwood's district and neighboring counties. No match. But Brooke, with a reporter's instinct for pattern, wasn't looking for the man anymore. She was looking for girls like Leah. It started with a single article from 2002 in the Grafton Courier-Town, just 70 miles west. A 17-year-old named Jamie Bell had vanished after telling her mother she was attending a weekend job fair hosted by an Art Path career program. No company registered under that name. The article noted that Jamie had left with her portfolio and a sketch pad. To her went cold after 2 weeks. The similarities hit Brooke like a wave. Art, teen girl, vanished, no witnesses. She began building a timeline. Between 1997 and 2003, 5 other girls had disappeared from towns within a 200-mile radius of Brentwood. All were between 15 and 17 years old. All were last seen heading to events described as modeling workshops. The names varied. The flyers' styles were inconsistent, but the language, the vague promises, the one-day urgency, the focus on portfolios was hauntingly familiar. Each girl was a quiet overachiever. Most came from single-parent homes. None received MBA alerts. Most were assumed to be runaways. Brooke typed the names into a spreadsheet. Jamie Bell, 17, Grafton, CO, 2002. Isla Chen, 15, Grafton, 1998. Sierra Dobson, 16, Elk Point, CO, 2001. Nia Fields, 17, Crow Ridge, CO, 1997. Callie Estrada, 16, Rosedale, Y, 2003. Leah Montgomery, 16, Brentwood, CO, 1999. All 6 fit the same demographic. All disappeared under near-identical circumstances. The horrifying pattern made Brooke's chest tighten. She brought the list to Reddle, who stared at the names and dates for several minutes before nodding grimly. "This was never just about Leah," he said. "This was a network, a strategy," Brooke added. They knew what kind of girls to look for, ones that wouldn't be missed quickly, smart, ambitious, slightly isolated, and ones who wouldn't fight the lure of an opportunity, Riedel said. "You think these workshops ever existed?" "Not really," Brooke replied. "They were a front. Whoever created them used art and modeling as bait. And now, I think it's possible we've only scratched the surface." Riedel contacted state law enforcement to request access to cold case files matching their parameters. Meanwhile, Brooke reached out to reporters in the small towns where the other girls had disappeared. Most editors didn't even remember the cases. A few mentioned that the families had moved away, unable to bear the lack of answers. But one call changed everything. It came from Grafton. A retired journalist named Laura Venn had covered Jamie Bell's disappearance and still kept a box of clippings in her basement. She agreed to meet Brooke in a cafe halfway between their towns. When Brooke arrived, Laura was already there with a manila envelope and a skeptical look. "I remember the girl," she said without preamble. "Right, quiet. Wanted to be a designer. Her mom said she was meeting someone about a scholarship, but no one ever followed up. Small-town politics. They wrote her off." Brooke opened the envelope and pulled out Jamie's flyer. The header read, "Future Creators Symposium, Visual Arts Track, different design than Leah's. Same language, same promises." "What do you know about the person who gave her the flyer?" Brooke asked. Laura shook her head. "Just that it was handed out at her school by someone calling himself Mr. Clay." Brooke's heart nearly stopped. She scribbled the name instantly. "Did he work at the school?" "Supposedly a visiting counselor, only there for 1 day. No one filed a complaint. No follow-up by admin." Brooke drove back to Brentwood with her hands shaking. When she reached the police station, Riedel was still going over the Sierra Vista room logs. She dropped the flyer in front of him. "We have a name," she said. "Mr. Clay. At least that's what he used in Grafton." Readily raised an eyebrow. "We need a full name. First, middle, last." "I'll find it," Brooke said. "I think he used different names in different towns, But there's a trail now. Reddle picked up his phone and called the state's Missing Persons Division. They'd need cross-collaboration now, multiple jurisdictions, possibly federal involvement. Brooke returned to her motel and laid out all 6 flyers across her bed. Despite the different headers, fonts, and logos, they all had something else in common. None listed a physical organization address. All directed the girls to local motels or event centers. And in every case, the location used had a reputation, slightly run down, off the main road, often shuttered within a year of the disappearances. She marked them on a map with red pins. A web was forming, and at the center of it, she began to suspect, was someone who had been moving freely through schools, targeting the ambitious and unseen. The red pins on Brooke's motel wall map had begun to take shape, not just as data points, but as evidence of a larger, calculated operation. Each pin, each missing girl, was connected by method, by language, by silence. And now a name, Mr. Clay. But that alias had turned up nothing concrete, no certified educator's license, no school district record. Brooke needed more. She began digging into faculty lists from the 6 towns she had identified, calling in favors from librarians, school secretaries, and retired teachers who might still have boxes of old yearbooks or attendance sheets in their basements. It was in the Brentwood High yearbook, class of 1999, that she found him. A substitute teacher listed only for the spring semester, Derek Sloan. No clubs, no classroom photo, just a stiff headshot and a line under his name, temporary staff, career, and life skills. The name rang faintly in her memory, a shadow from the hallways she'd once walked. She dug deeper, pulling his personnel record from the school district archives with the help of a clerk who owed her a favor from a prior story. The file was thin, barely a dozen pages. Application, copy of a bachelor's degree, a brief performance review from the then principal. But what caught Brooke's eye was a post-it note stapled to the back of one page. It was yellowed, clearly added after the fact. In quick, casual handwriting, it read, "Student concern, see extra inappropriate comment. No follow-up." Brooke's breath caught. Kali Estrada, the 6th girl on her list, the one who vanished in 2003 from Rosedale. She hadn't known Sloan had ever worked in that district, but now there was a direct link between him and one of the victims, a girl who had raised an informal complaint that had been quietly buried. Handled internally was school district code for ignored. Brooke printed the note, added it to her file, and took the elevator to the county registrar's office. There, under property development filings from the last 5 years, she found Derek Sloan's name again, but this time not as a teacher. He was listed as managing director for the Brentwood Redevelopment Partnership, a private provident entity created to rehabilitate underutilized land. One of their largest current projects, a redevelopment of the Sierra Vista Inn lot. Sloan had personally filed the request for expected demolition, waiving historical inspection and environmental review due to structural instability. Brooke read the filing 3 times, then sat in silence for a full minute. He hadn't just taught at Leah's school, he hadn't just disappeared after the semester she went missing. Here he had returned, under a new title, a new role, and orchestrated the destruction of the one location that now held physical evidence of her disappearances. It felt too deliberate to be coincidence. She drove straight to Riddell's office, laid the documents in front of him, and said, "We have a name, we have a motive, and we have a cover-up." Riddell read slowly, methodically. His expression hardened. "You'll think?" "You think he's cleaning up old mistakes?" "I think he's hiding in plain sight," Brooke said. "And I think this redevelopment project was never about urban renewal. It was about eliminating what was left." Reed said, ordered a background check on Sloan. What came back was carefully scrubbed, a clean criminal record, no traffic violations, a polished resume with vague language about youth mentorship and nonprofit advocacy from 1998 to 2004. But when they contacted the school district from Grafton, they confirmed Sloan had applied there under the same license ID in 2002. He'd used the title Career Development Consultant. No one there remembered much about him, just that he'd left after a few months. Riedel forwarded all findings to the state task force. He also placed an informal request to track Sloan's travel history, financial records, and property holdings. Meanwhile, Brooke requested an interview. Sloane's assistant returned the email promptly, offering a brief window at his city office, 20 minutes only. The building was sterile, glass and metal, designed to inspire trust. Sloane's office had high ceilings, a view of the Brentwood Hills, and no family photos, just a desk, a planner, and a wall of framed certificates. Sloane entered exactly on time, in a tailored suit, silver hair carefully combed. He looked older, distinguished, unbothered. "Miss Alvarez," he said smoothly, "I understand you're working on a story about Sierra Vista?" "That's right," Brooke replied, "specifically the history of the property and the recent discovery." Sloane gave a professional nod. "Unfortunate timing, but perhaps this will bring some closure to the community." Brooke didn't flinch. "You were a teacher once, Mr. Sloane. Spring of 1999, Brentwood High." A flicker of something passed through his eyes, recognition, maybe, but it vanished quickly. "Briefly," he said, "that was another lifetime." "Did you know Leah Montgomery?" Brooke asked, her voice flat. Sloane tilted his head. "The name rings a bell, but I don't believe we interacted directly. That case is tragic." Brooke pulled out a copy of the flyer, the one recovered from the wall. "This was found with her belongings. You were also present in Grafton in 2002. Another girl disappeared there. Are you accusing me of something, Miss Alvarez?" he asked quietly, his voice edged now. "I'm asking questions you seem to be the answer to," she said. Sloane stood. "Then I think this meeting is over." She gathered her papers and left without another word, but her recorder had been running the entire time. Outside, the air felt sharper. The wind carried the scent of earth turning, something being unearthed. As she walked to her car, Brooke knew she had more than enough to push this further. Sloane had changed his clothes, his role, his tone, but not his pattern. The girls were linked, and so was he. The morning after Brooke's tense interview with Derek Sloane, Detective Riddell received a call from the Brentwood Public Works Department. The foreman reported that Malik Reyes, the janitor who had discovered Leah Montgomery's dress, had failed to show up for his shift for 2 consecutive days. At first, they assumed he was ill or taking unpaid time off, but when his phone went unanswered and a neighbor reported newspapers piling up on his porch, concern escalated. Reed drove out to Malik's trailer on the north edge of town, a modest one-storm unit tucked beneath a cluster of pine trees, quiet and undisturbed. His truck, a rusted Ford with peeling paint, was still parked in the gravel drive, keys nowhere in sight. The front door was latched, but unlocked. Reed spurred open, calling Malik's name. No response. The interior was neat, oddly so, dishes stacked clean in the drying rack, a half-eaten sandwich still wrapped in foil on the counter, as if someone had left in the middle of lunch and never returned. The bedroom was undisturbed. The closet door was shut, but it was what lay in the living room that stopped Riddell cold. On the coffee table, beneath a thin layer of dust, sat a shoebox sealed with masking tape. A single yellow post-it on top bore 3 words in shaky handwriting. "Don't ignore this." Riddell slipped on gloves and cut the tape. A silver charm bracelet with a broken clasp, a laminated school ID for someone named Ayla C., a folded note on ruled paper written in blue ink. "I'll be back by 9, don't wait up." Each belonged to a different girl. None of the names appeared in Brentwood's missing persons database. Riddell scanned and photographed each item before packaging them for evidence. He then began calling in IDs to the State Missing Persons Division, expanding the scope beyond Brentwood. One by one, names began surfacing, cases from other counties, even other states. Girls between 15 and 17, all missing under unclear circumstances, none tied together publicly. Each object in Malik's box pointed to someone who had vanished. The sheer number was staggering. In the closet, Riddell found a second container, a weathered accordion file stuffed with paper. Inside were torn pages from sketchbooks, concert ticket stubs, student newsletters, and dozens of loose photographs, most undated. One photo featured a girl standing in front of what looked like an old gas station. Another showed a smiling teen holding up a certificate of participation from something called Vision Next. Riddell called Brooke immediately. "Malik Reyes is gone," he said, "and he left behind a box full of things we can't account for. Names, IDs, letters. He knew something." Brooke arrived at the station an hour later, her jaw set, her eyes scanning the evidence now laid out on the table. "You think he was involved?" she asked. "Or a witness?" Riedel shook his head slowly. "I think he was caught in something and didn't know how to handle it. He found the dress. And now he's missing. That's not coincidence." They contacted Malik's sister, who lived 2 counties away. She hadn't heard from him in over a week. "He called last Friday," she said. "Said he was scared, that something he'd found was bigger than he thought. I told him to go to the police. He said he already had—" Red Stagmanik's last bank transactions on the morning he went missing. Red settlements showed Malik purchasing a coffee and standing near the payphone for several minutes. Then he left, alone. No further charges, no hotel stays, no bus tickets. As if he'd vanished into thin air. Riedel put out a bolo, "Be on the lookout," for Malik Reyes across Colorado and neighboring states. The photo of his truck and a brief description were sent to law enforcement channels and posted internally. But there was more. In the box under Malik's bed, they found a list, hand-advertised motel name, and 2 or 3 letters. Rath immediately recognized the initials, L-Mel for Leah Montgomery, J.B. for Jamie Bell. Both sisters' dogs were Syria Dobson. There were 16 entries in total, and not all of them had been tied to missing persons cases. Yet. "This is a ledger," Riedel muttered. "He was tracking something, or someone." Brooke nodded slowly. "These aren't random. They're records, evidence. And if Malik was collecting it, then maybe he was trying to expose it," Riedel finished. They spent the next 12 hours scanning the initials and dates, cross-referencing them with old police logs and archived newspapers. Each combination, where it matched, led to a story of a girl who disappeared, but now there were more initials than confirmed cases, meaning more victims. Possibly girls whose disappearances hadn't even been reported. Brooke pressed her palms to her eyes, exhaustion hitting like a wave. "Stack need to find Malik," she whispered. "He could be the only person who can tie all of this together." Riedel agreed. But deep down, he feared Malik was already gone, not just missing, but silenced. Rita sat in the evidence room staring at Malik Reyes's worn notebook, its pages filled with uneven pen strokes, some fading, some scratched out, but all painfully intentional. He flipped to the page marked April 17, 1999, and his eyes locked onto the entry that confirmed what he already feared. L. SVN was Sierra Vista, the exact date Leah Montgomery disappeared, and Elm could only be Leah's initials. For that were similar entries, different locations, same format. Pine Haven Motel, August 22, 98. Red Maple Lodge, March 13, 2, JB, map to JB. Just Cedar Trail Inn, June 5, 0. 16 entries in all. Riedel mapped the data, placing pins for each motel, each date. What emerged was no longer just coincidence. It was a pattern. These were not random girls from unrelated towns. These were targeted victims, each linked to a specific location and date, all within the span of 6 years. He shared the findings with Brooke, who immediately noticed a second detail. Scribbled in the margins were symbols, tiny sketches next to some names. One was a rose, another a 5-point star. "These aren't doodles," she said. "They're identifiers." Malik was building a legend, a system. Maybe the symbols matched something at the scene. Riedel contacted the task force. He organized search teams to revisit the locations listed in the notebook, prioritizing those still standing. Within 48 hours, 2 abandoned motels were identified, one in Rosedale, Wyoming, and the other in Elk Point, Colorado. Both were marked with matching entries in Malik's book. The Rosedale site had long since shuttered after a fire in 2005. The building's shell remained, half-collapsed, charred beams visible through holes in the siding. Investigators combed through the remnant, and under a collapsed bathroom sink in room 7, they found a burnt fragment of canvas paper. The lower right corner bore a familiar signature. The initials matched the girl who vanished in 2003. The style was eerily close to Leah's. Rounded line work, a precision to the floral motifs, a softness to the pencil shading. "She was trying to be like Leah," Brooke whispered. Or maybe Leah inspired her. In Elk Point, the Red Maple Lodge had been boarded up but structurally intact. With permission from the county, Riedel's team forced entry and swept the interior. In room 4, behind a loose floorboard, they discovered a zippered portfolio. Inside were 6 sketches, all fashion speakas, dresses, accessories, fabric swatches taped in with masking tape. Each drawing carried initials, JB, and matched the style of Jamie Bell, the girl who vanished from Grafton. The similarities to Leah's designs were undeniable. Same layout, same ink choices, even the same measurement notations. "He gave them assignments," Riedel muttered. "He made them create, and then he made them disappear." Brooke stared at the pages, her heart tightening. Or maybe they were trying to leave something behind, something only another artist would recognize. At the task force headquarters, a forensic analyst compared the drawing strokes from the Rosedale and Elk Point finds with the original pages from Leah's sketchbook. There were common elements in every image, shared themes, recurring symbols, even similar pressure on the graphite lines. The connections ran deeper than inspiration. They suggested a shared experience. Malik's notebook hadn't just listed the victims, it had chronicled their journey, a trail of creative breadcrumbs left behind in forgotten rooms, behind cracked walls, beneath rotting floorboards. Riedel began to suspect Malik had been following the same trail. Maybe he hadn't known what it meant at first. Maybe he had stumbled on one item, one name, and then started looking deeper. He was tracking something no one else had seen, and now, with the evidence mounting, Riedel ordered a search for any other motels with matching criteria, cheap, secluded, used intermittently between 1997 and 2003. A new algorithm was written to scan old city permit records, transient guest logs, and tax filings. Meanwhile, Brooke returned to Brentwood High. She needed to see Leah's old art classroom. The principal, reluctant but compliant, let her in after hours. The room had changed, but not completely. The same chalkboard lined the front wall. The cabinets still held yellowed paper and dried-out glue sticks. In the back corner, Brooke found a cabinet labeled Archives Pre-2000. Inside, stacked beneath outdated supply catalogs, were portfolios from past students. She found Leah's within minutes. Its edges were frayed, but the inside pages remained pristine. And taped to the back cover was something unexpected. A business card. D.C. Sloan Corks, Youth Career Coordinator, Vision Next Pathways. No phone number, no email, just the title and a P.O. Box stared at the card. Derek Clay, Darrell Sloan. It had always been him. The aliases were his. The flyers, the false programs, the promises. He had been the constant. And Malik had known it. Redhead called her that evening with another update. "We found a 7th location," he said, "and it's still standing." The 7th location was a decommissioned rest lodge off Highway 214 called Crescent Pines, closed since 2006 due to asbestos violations. It was marked CP, July 19, 0000, and Malik had all the cry to assist under the area console. And from the moment Riedel stepped inside, the air felt different, heavier, like it remembered what had been done there. In room 3, beneath a mirror frame warped with time, the forensic team uncovered a message scratched faintly into the plaster with the end of a pencil. He said it was art. The name Nia was barely legible underneath. It was enough. The state task force issued a full forensic order on all known locations tied to Malik's records. Simultaneously, the FBI reopened the archive of Leah Montgomery's original case file, this time under homicide protocol. That was when a clerk found a half-fold incident form stapled to the back of a misfiled report. It was dated April 18, 1999, one day after Leah disappeared. A woman named Carla Dennison had called in from a gas station down the road from Sierra Vista. She claimed seen a tall man loading a teenage girl into a green pickup around 12:45 p.m. The girl looked hesitant, she said, but didn't scream. The man told her they were going to a local career workshop. Carla wrote down part of the license plate. She even gave a description of the man, mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, beige jacket. But the report had been dismissed, labeled insufficient for follow-up. No one called her back. Riedel visited Carla personally. Now retired, she still remembered that day. "I never forgot her face," she said. Looked unsure, not scared, but something wasn't right. I just knew it. When Rita showed her a photo of Derek Sloan from 1999, her hands trembled. "That's him," she said. "That's the man." It was the first eyewitness ID placing Sloan with Leah on the day she vanished. But Rita needed more. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, a real estate warehouse Sloan had leased in 2010 and later abandoned. It was only recently cleared for auction, and Riddell's warrant landed just in time. Inside, in a locked storage unit beneath plastic tarps, they found remnants of an old vehicle, specifically a detached carpet liner from what looked like a pickup's rear seating. Crime lab techs swabbed the fibers and matched it to trace DNA pulled from the hem of Leah's recovered dress. The mitochondrial DNA was conclusive. It belonged to Leah Montgomery. That same carpet piece contained partial DNA matches to two other victims from the Malik list, Jamie Bell and Callie Estrada. Riddell read the results in silence, the paper shaking slightly in his hands. For 21 years, they had looked for proof that Leah did. Now they had it. Sloan was arrested the next morning at his Brentwood office without incident. He asked for his attorney, said nothing else, but the look in his eyes, calm, detached, confident, unsettled even the arresting officers. At the press conference, Riddell spoke plainly. Have linked Derek Sloan to the disappearance of at least 3 teenage girls using physical evidence, eyewitness testimony, and corroborated timelines. We believe he operated a fraudulent youth career program to lure vulnerable students across multiple states between 1997 and 2003. When asked about the possibility of other victims, Riddell didn't hesitate. We're treating all 16 cases in Malik Reyes's notebook as credible. This is no longer just a local investigation. It's federal. The arrest sent shockwaves through Colorado and beyond. Reporters dug through old school rosters, tracked property records, re-examined every case Sloan had touched. More families came forward, some with daughters still missing, others with stories of suspicious encounters that had once been dismissed. Malik Reyes was never found, but his notebook, now preserved in the State Evidence Archive, became known informally as the Ledger. It held the names, dates, and final locations of girls who had been forgotten, giving them, at last, a voice. Brooke published the story in the Denver Tribune under the title, What He Called Opportunity. The article went viral within days, sparking renewed legislation around missing teen protocols and prompting state education departments to overhaul their guest screening policies. Vanessa Montgomery sat alone in her living room, the newspaper folded gently in her lap. Her fingers traced the edges of Leah's senior photo on the mantel, now framed in gold. The caption beneath it read, "She never made it to prom, but she made them all remember." At the trial, Sloan pled not guilty. The prosecution, armed with DNA, testimony, and a decade of unanswered questions, dismantled his defense piece by piece. The verdict came after 4 days of deliberation. Guilty on all counts, he was sentenced to life without parole. The courtroom erupted in quiet tears. Outside, families of the other girls embraced, whispered names long buried, and promised never to forget again. Riddell visited Leah's grave the following morning. A bouquet of orange lilies in hand, he stood in silence as the wind rustled the grass. "We found him," he said softly. "You were right to believe in her." The case file was closed, the girls were named, the wall had cracked, and through it justice stepped forward. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss what's coming next. I want to hear your thoughts. What part of Leah's story struck you the most? And where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. These voices matter, and so does yours.